Okay, hang on. Hang on.
Well, hello, everybody. We're open tonight for fun and so glad to see you here. Everybody, let's get down and rock and roll tonight as we discuss two solo Beatles rock and roll albums. Before we get into that, though, of course, well, there they are right there. I knew Tom would. That's why I don't bother getting mine. I know Tom's always dependable and he's got them and everything. So anyway, let's start by
different cover.
Some of you may know who we are. Some of you may not know. Well, anyway, I'm Joe Mayo. I have a YouTube channel called Mean Mr. Mayo. My brother is Mean Mr. Mustard. You might have heard of him. So I'm here with my three co-hosts to start with: the queen of backdrops, the queen of rock and roll albums, the queen of Beatles media, the Sun Queen, who has books out here, among them Songs We Were Singing, guided tours through the Beatles' lesser-known tracks, and Fandom and the Beatles, Michael Jackson FAQ, all that's left to know about the King of Pop. She does Toppermost of the Poppermost podcast. I'm talking about Kit O'Toole. Hello, Kit.
Hello, Joe, Ken, Tom. Three of my favorite people I love spending Monday nights with, and hello, everybody out there.
And she already introduced the two of you, so we're good. No. Everybody gets their full introduction. Next, we have one of the two legs of the Paul McCartney podcast, videocast, known as Two Legs, Tom Hunyadi, who also does the show with Andy Nichols. So Paul McCartney is in good hands with that show, as always.
Thank you.
And last but not least, I don't like bringing him up at the end, but you know he's been around for a long time in the business, over 40 years. You know, by a little bit.
As Paul says, he's been around a long time, but he's still all right for a while.
I'm still good for a while.
Well, he's got so much to do all the time. We don't know how he does it. He just had a little vacation recently, so maybe that helped a little bit. We're talking about projects such as his long-running radio show, Every Little Thing, the syndicated show, and then he has a podcast on YouTube, Things We Said Today, Beatles podcast, and he has his own YouTube channel here with all kinds of trivia contests, interviews, and so many guests. Ken Michaels Radio. I'm talking about Ken Michaels. Ken, it's a pleasure, as always, to be here.
Hey, Joe. It's great to be here, and one of my favorite times of the week, spending it with you guys. And of course, our viewers and listeners.
Now, I'm wondering, last time we had Mark Hudson on our show, right? The last time we did it, please watch that show. It's really, really great if you haven't seen it already. But I don't think we covered the news then. So I'm wondering, is there any news, Ken?
Oh, there's plenty of news. We really wanted to focus on what Mark had to say, and that's why we didn't do the news on the last show. But there's a lot of catching up to do. We're going to start with, of course, the passing of one of the greatest entertainers of all time, a master singer of music standards, and that, of course, being Tony Bennett. At the age of 96, Tony's career stretched over 7 decades with classic hits like I Left My Heart in San Francisco, Rags to Riches, and Because of You. And we know that he and Paul McCartney recorded the standard, The Very Thought of You. It was on this album right here.
Oh.
Okay, Duets, an American classic. And that was back in 2006. Bennett's career also benefited in recent years by teaming up with more current artists of the time, like Katie Lang and Diana Krall, and especially Lady Gaga. Bennett's last album with Lady Gaga, by the way, Love for Sale from 2 years ago, went to number 8 on the pop charts, number 1 on the jazz charts. Not bad for a man in his 90s. Paul McCartney made a statement about Tony Bennett. He said, very sad to hear that Tony Bennett has died. He was a special singer and a good friend. I was privileged to work with him on a few occasions, and he was always a wonder to behold. Thanks, Tony, for the joy you brought to our world. Love, Paul. Okay. Very nice duet the two of them did. I kind of wish they did more together, but hey, be grateful for that moment, Paul and Tony together. But certainly, my goodness, just one of the greatest singers ever. I feel very fortunate that several years ago, when it was announced that he had Alzheimer's disease, my family went to see him in concert, and he delivered the goods, boy. A good solid hour on stage. You'd never know there's anything wrong with him. You know, just an amazing singer.
They said I think his last concert was even as recent as 2021. I think I heard somebody say.
Really?
It might have been Ghosty, but I'm not sure. I was listening to a show, and it still was doing well.
Yeah, I got to see him a few times in concert, and every time he just absolutely moved me. I mean, it was one of the times I saw him. I mean, I actually was moved to tears the way he sang. I mean, he just knew how to interpret lyrics. He made you listen to every word he sang. I mean, there just aren't many singers that can do that. He was the last of his kind, like Frank Sinatra and so many others. So
and Frank considered him the greatest singer.
Yeah.
Really?
Wow. And I'm sure right now, he's joining Eddie Mecca, who was the great Raghu from Laverne and Shirley, singing Rags to Riches together up there. For those of us who remember the Laverne and Shirley show, that was Carmine Raghu's signature song.
Oh, God, I forgot about that. Oh my gosh. But yeah, I mean, we knew, I think we all knew this was
going to happen.
Yeah. But sad nonetheless. I mean, you'll be greatly, greatly missed.
Okay.
Yeah. Agreed.
There will be a few more passings that I will note at the very end of the newscast. Paul McCartney is entering the podcast world. That's good. We need more competition.
Yeah, great. Yeah. Thanks, Paul.
He is launching a new show called McCartney, A Life in Lyrics, a collaboration between McCartney and poet Paul Muldoon. The two of them collaborated on Paul's bestseller from last year, The Lyrics Book, and each episode will focus on a single song from Paul's Beatles and solo career, based on conversations that McCartney and Muldoon had with each other, in which they cover the stories, people, experiences, and art that inspired the songs. There will be 12 episodes for its first season, and saying there's a first season implies there will be a second season. Songs tackled in the first season include Eleanor Rigby, Back in the USSR, Let It Be, When Winter Comes, Penny Lane, Uncle Albert, Admiral Halsey, Here Today, Live and Let Die, Magical Mystery Tour, Jenny Wren, Too Many People, and Helter Skelter. When the two of them created the book, there were more than 50 hours of conversation they had. And Muldoon said they created something special with McCartney Unfiltered. The first episode of McCartney, A Life in Lyrics will premiere on September the 20th, with new episodes coming weekly, and you'll be able to listen to them on iHeartRadio, Apple, Spotify, and other audio platforms. If you are a subscriber to Pushkin, you will have access to the entire season on the first day of its release. And in November, the McCartney Lyrics book, oh, you'll like this. The McCartney Lyrics book will be available for the first time as a paperback with additional chapters not in the hardcover.
Oh,
yeah.
So now you got to get that too.
So, Shades of
Egypt.
I think they wisely didn't promote one particular song in this first season, which is a story we don't need to hear again.
Maybe you shouldn't bring it up.
So.
You got me wondering.
To some people, that's news,
Yeah, unfortunately.
The second season, they say, is already planned and will begin in February with another 12 McCartney songs.
Yeah, see, we could have done this, We could have easily said, hey, come on, Paul. We can easily do this podcast with you. You don't need the other Paul.
Yeah,
we'll
let's go. Yeah. Let's go.
Yeah. Could have done this.
Hey, he's anytime he wants to. He can come on. He can
Yep.
run the show.
No problem.
We're
Anytime at
making
all.
you the offer.
Come on, Paul.
One of the big news items of the last few weeks, and I'm sorry it's taken this long for us to even talk about it, but about Penn Jillette, who said on his podcast show that he visited Abbey Road Studios, met Giles Martin, and Penn said that he got to hear Now and Then. The original recording had John's voice, piano, and the television on loud, and they took out the television. So I guess that loud hum that we heard all this time was probably coming from the television.
Oh, maybe because John always had the TV on. Was that why?
Well, he was
Which is
a TV
true.
junkie.
Yeah.
Yeah.
From the Beatles session, they had some of George's guitar playing, which they are using in this new recording. Paul wanted to sing along to John's voice, but they made it a younger voice. We'll
That's
a
talk
red
about
flag
that
right
in a
there.
moment.
That's
Yeah.
the first thing.
And they also used an outtake from Because, with John, Paul, and George harmonizing on one chord. They took that chord and they changed the key, which they used for their backing vocals. Paul added bass. They put on an orchestra and horns in. Giles contacted Ringo and asked him to add his drums. And originally Ringo didn't want to. This is what Penn is saying. Giles said to him, "You're the drummer for the Beatles. This is the last Beatles song." And he ended up mailing the tapes to Ringo. Ringo recorded his drums at his home and mailed it back to Giles. The new Beatles single will be out in about a month or September, they're saying. Gillette got to hear the new Beatles song in the very studio that it was mixed in. And Gillette was also told that they are mixing the red and blue collections. And he said with the new mix, and he apparently has heard something from it, you can hear John and Paul's vocals as though they were a foot apart. He said even in stereo mixes, you can tell John and Paul's vocals, as you hear them in your head, but there's more separation this way. So guys, what do you have to say about this? We haven't really talked about this since this news was made public on Penn's podcast.
Well, for one thing, I just want to say, I made a video about it. I didn't know at the time the bit about Paul de-aging his voice. But people have been telling me in the comments that no, on the contrary, Ringo supposedly did say that he played on the song originally or something, that's not true, and da 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 da. So I don't know what's true or what's not in that. Take that as you will, whether Ringo actually said no, I don't want to do it, or he had already had done something originally, but they obviously needed a new track. I don't know what the facts are on that exactly, And one thing I want to say before I hand it over to you, the Red and the Blue albums, at first I was like, oh, not again, not another reissue of the Red and the Blue albums. Then I started to think, well, if they're remixed, there are going to be some songs on it that we have not heard remixed yet, although a lot of it we have. The song Girl comes to mind, that's on the Red album. And maybe Old Brown Shoe. I don't think that was remixed.
Well, everything prior to Revolver.
Right.
Because we haven't had archival box sets remixed of those.
Right. So, I mean, a lot of things, but some of them for the one album.
Right.
Although maybe, some of the early tracks for the one album when that was remixed.
Well, you don't know if these are even newer remixes of the early.
Right. So I'm a little excited if it's going to be remixed now.
Right. Well, I mean, another thing too is apparently that show had been taken down, so it doesn't. If you didn't get to listen to it before, I guess you're not going to get to listen to it again, which then makes me think that he shouldn't have said anything. And I've been saying all along, I wish Paul never said anything about this, because it's just been, now it's just all this, because
now
he said,
it's all this.
Now it's all this. I mean, so I mean, Paul had said that they only used AI to remove the hissing or the TV sound. Okay, now Penn is contradicting that and saying, oh, they used AI to make Paul's voice sound younger. I don't want this. I just want to hear the song. I don't want any controversy surrounding this song. Let's just get it. If they're going to put the Red and the Blue album out, fine, because again, like Joe said, there's a lot of songs that haven't been remixed in the style that Giles has been doing for the last 5 years. So you know, and I'm hoping though that if it is Now and Then, that it's not going to be presented on the red and the blue, because you know, if I got to buy it just for the red and the blue, just for that Now and Then, I'm going to feel it's kind of, I think it kind of cheapens it. You know,
Thank you.
I never heard anything about it being connected with the.
I'm not saying it is. I'm just saying I'm hoping it's not.
It was it was another.
Yeah.
I don't know if it was Williamson. It was somebody was speculating. It's not spouting, speculating.
Right. See, because that's all this is, and it's. I know we have fun speculating, but I hate it. I hate it with speculating with a passion. Just give me the facts, and we'll deal with it.
Just the facts.
Okay,
just
because
the facts,
because you know, we all, I guess people love to speculate. That's fine, but I'm a facts guy. That I want the facts, and then we'll deal with it then.
I completely agree with you, Tom.
Yeah.
But you know how it is in the Beatle world. There are people out there that have their own podcast shows, and the minute there's a splinter of news, they have to say something about it.
Right.
Yeah.
And if you don't say something, then people question, why aren't you saying anything?
Yeah.
So it's a tough position to be in.
Or just present, if you're going to do it, present it as speculation. Don't present it as fact or confirmation. You know?
Well, of course, my initial reaction was, since when is Penn Jillette a Beatles insider? That was my first reaction. I had no idea that you know, I guess he and Giles must be friends. I guess that must be it. I guess the other, you know, alarm bell that rang for me was when he was talking about, you know, the background of Now and Then, and he kept saying that they first worked on it in the 80s, and he went through this whole thing about 80s. And I was like, nope, that's not the story, you know. So I thought, I'm, you know, so alarm bells were going off for me. So I'm like, okay, he doesn't have the story right. You know, I just wondered, I'm not saying he didn't hear it. I'm not saying he's lying or anything like that, but I just wondered, you know, and then talking about the AI stuff, and, you know, I'm just wondering, you know, how much of this story does he have right? I mean, how accurate is this?
Yeah.
So
how
again,
accurate?
I'm not saying he didn't hear it. I'm just saying I don't think, I just wonder how accurate the background is here, you know, the whole story. As far as the Red and Blue album, I mean, I'll admit I was really disappointed when I heard that, because I just thought, you know, come on, where's the Rubber Soul box set? I mean, there's so many other things I would rather see. You have a good point, Joe, though, that there are some songs that would be on it that we haven't heard remixed yet. I mean, that's a good point. But, you know, admittedly, I've never felt a great connection to the Red and Blue albums, because that's not how I was introduced to the Beatles. You know, the Red and Blue albums just weren't that big in my life. I mean, as I've said many times, it was the 20 greatest hits that introduced me to the Beatles. So admittedly, they just haven't been as big in my life, you know. So that's just me. But I, you know, and Tom, you know, I agree. If this is somehow connected to the Red and Blue albums, and I had to, you know, buy one or the other at all to get Now and Then, yes, I would not be happy, you know. So I'm hoping this is some separate kind of.
Wouldn't they have to change the title? 67 to 70, you couldn't.
I mean, then
exactly.
Yeah, exactly. So I mean, I would feel a little ripped off. I would admit, but so, you know, I'm excited to hear whatever this is. But I agree with you, Tom. This speculation, maybe they're just trying to build excitement for this, particularly Paul.
They don't have to. That's what I'm trying to say.
I don't know. Why are they doing?
They don't have to do this. I mean, it's the Beatles, for Christ's sake, you know.
Right. No, it's true.
You know, the popularity is still there. I mean, once this does get announced, I really feel that that's all they needed to do. Paul didn't need to let this slip, you know, earlier this month, and then Penn didn't need to do this little thing. Ringo didn't need to do his.
come
I
on.
do think
you know,
it creates
he's-
excitement, though. I mean, I do like it a little bit, to tell you the truth.
Mhm,
But
Paul
what's
knows
true and what's not?
mhm.
Paul knows what
Yeah,
he's doing.
okay.
You know, he's doing this to start
I
generating excitement.
Buzz.
And, you
Mhm.
know, he's doing this while he's promoting his book of photos, and more attention was paid to Now and Then than the
Mhm.
book.
yeah.
He started saying that.
With
So,
with the because line, by the way, I'm not thrilled with that idea of putting because in there, unless I don't
Yeah.
have this straight. Is it a line that wasn't used in because, like a different thing? If we're going to sing the same words that are in because, I'm not going to be wild about that. The same.
Or yeah, or were they
So,
just harmonies that he's talking about?
Right.
You know, backing
Oh,
harmonies.
ahs and things, ahs and oohs and
Yeah.
things like that.
Yeah, I
it-
mean,
it's starting to remind me a little bit of Love. You know,
Yeah.
taking bits and
It's
pieces of one song,
Yeah.
putting
You're
it.
Frankenstein.
No, that's what
Yeah.
it is. Yeah.
Yes. Yeah.
So I don't know. This is this, and so yeah, this description from Penn Jillette, it's like, okay, now I'm further confused. But then that whole section where he talked about it being in the 80s, all right, I'm like, okay, now the credibility's gone down a bit. So, you know, again, I'm not saying he didn't hear it or anything like that. You know, somebody mentioned in the comments, why would he lie about this? I'm not saying he's lying about this. I'm just saying that he may have the details, you know, a bit mixed up. That's all I'm saying.
Right.
You know?
Well,
Mhm.
I'm with Tom. It's like, just wait till the record comes out and listen to it and
Yes.
then judge it. At this
Mhm.
point, I don't
Right.
want to hear any more bits of information. I just want to hear the song and then present all the facts to us, everything that
Yeah.
we should know about the recording of it. But
There you go.
and as far as the Red and the Blue, you know, they were really important releases. I mean, they
Mhm.
were the Beatles one of its time.
Right.
And they were on the charts for a very long time. And I know that you don't have any connection with it, Kit, but a lot of people who grew up with it did.
Oh
And
yeah, in the 70s,
the
absolutely.
important thing about those two collections is that it wasn't just the greatest hits, because they did have a lot of album cuts in there. Certainly they had to put a lot of album cuts in the Blue collection, because from 67 to 70 there were less singles that were being released. So you had to, I don't want to say pad the collection, because it's all great stuff. How can you have nothing from the White Album, you know, or with
Right.
no singles from the White Album when it first came out?
Right.
Or,
Well, because Obla Di Obla Da was a single in other countries, you know. So I mean, to your point, yeah, why not have anything from the White Album on there? It doesn't make any
Yeah.
sense.
but they were really important collections. And
Mhm.
I always think that it's important periodically to put out something that caters to a mass audience and not just the hardcore fans that are looking forward to every archival box set. But I also don't want this to take the place of Rubber Soul. You know,
Yes.
I don't
You're gonna
see.
get all that stuff. You're gonna get that, I'm sure.
Mhm.
No, but I mean, I think most of us were expecting it by the end of this year. We still
Right.
don't know if we're going to get it at the
Right.
end of this year.
I think this is a way for them just expanding these releases, right? Because once these last albums are out, I mean, then what's next after that? Then we get into what, 65th anniversaries and stuff like that. So I think this is a way to just like, okay, let's say it's halftime, all right? So now we're dealing with you know, the Red and the Blue, the new song, and then we'll continue with the rest of the albums. So
Well,
let's
none of
say
us
this
knows.
is just halftime. Yeah,
This is-
exactly. Nobody knows.
This is all a guessing
Nobody
game for all of
knows.
us.
Speculation.
Speculation.
Your favorite, Tom.
There you go. You,
There
you
are
got
fans-
me in. Just when I thought I was out, you pulled me back in.
There are fans out there that love all this speculation stuff. So
Mhm. Yep.
there was a part of me that thought, hey, you know, this year is the 60th anniversary of Please Please Me and with the Beatles.
Mhm.
Yeah.
Will they go back to that, or are they really going to do Rubber Soul? And then this
Mhm.
threw me completely off with the Red and the
Yeah.
Blue. So
Yep.
who knows? More news. Paul is in a new documentary called Squaring the Circle, The History of Hypnosis. This was the team that did amazing artwork for album covers for Paul, Pink Floyd, Led Zeppelin, Peter Gabriel, the Alan Parsons Project, Noel Gallagher, and 10cc. Best known for the front cover of Dark Side of the Moon for Paul McCartney and Wings. They did all the album covers from Band on the Run through Back to the Egg, and after that for Tug of War. So Paul is in this new documentary. Our good friend Ken Womack wrote in Salon that the Rock and Roll Hall of Fame in Cleveland is commemorating Ringo's recent 83rd birthday by having his Peace and Love statue on display there, and it will be there all summer long. The museum is continuing to run their Beatle film from Get Back to Let It Be, which runs through the end of the year. And they also have John Lennon's famous Epiphone Casino guitar that he played on the Apple rooftop. According to the Beatles newsletter, the very popular Cirque du Soleil show that we just talked about, The Beatles Love, which has been entertaining over 11 million fans for 17 years now, rumored to be ending later this year in Las Vegas. Now we hear will be continuing through 2024 at the Mirage Hotel in partnership with the Hard Rock International. Couple of releases on Dark Horse Records, Shankar Family and Friends, which just reissued on July the 14th. Produced by George. This is Ravi Shankar's 1974 album, now available again on Orchid, color vinyl, and CD, and remastered by Paul Hicks. Dark Horse Records will be releasing Joe Strummer's iconic London benefit concert and his unexpected last reunion with Mick Jones of The Clash for the release live at Acton Hall, remastered for CD and double LP. This is the first time the album has been... What's that?
Oh, sorry. Go ahead. No, go ahead. I'll wait.
The album has been available on CD. This is the first time it's going to be available on CD, and it's a full vinyl release featuring 2 LP clear vinyl with gatefold packaging, new liner notes, and previously unseen photos. Again, remastered by Paul Hicks. Release date for this is August the 18th.
All right. So the song, the track that they released on George Harrison's YouTube channel that coincide with that Shankar Family and Friends is phenomenal. It's the most clear video I've seen of that 74 tour. It sounds phenomenal. So whether or not the Peter Jackson's team used their Mel to help clear it up or use it for the audio, but this is some of the most amazing footage. It looked like it was just filmed. It looks beautiful. So go to George Harrison YouTube channel and you'll see that video that coincides with that re-release of Shankar Family and Friends.
Okay, thank you, Tom. I'm making a note of it. Right after the show's over, I'll be watching.
Yeah.
All right, our friend Glenn Greenberg is back with a new bookazine, all on the making of the Beatles' White Album. Every song and every story behind the songs are covered. Glenn has had bookazines dedicated to John Lennon and also Paul McCartney for when it was his 80th birthday, and recently had one all on Beatles trivia. So you can look for that in supermarkets and pharmacies. The making of the Beatles' White Album. With special thanks to Scott O'Rourke, who sends me news all the time. Does a Beatles show on WUSB on Long Island called With the Beatles. An excerpt of the Beatles recording of Magical Mystery Tours featured in the new Indiana Jones movie, Indiana Jones and the Dial of Destiny. There's a new release coming out August the 18th, Abbey Road Reimagined, a tribute to the Beatles, produced by our friend, Fernando Perdomo.
Hey.
All the songs, we know him from the Ram On tribute that he did, that he worked on with Denny Sywell. All the songs from Abbey Road are covered. Some have already been released before. This will be on Cleopatra Records on CD. That's coming out August the 18th. Also, just released on June 2nd is a digital album called Play McCartney. It's by Malik Rashan, Rashaun, and Max Kumo, Comeau. Malik plays the piano, Max does the lead vocals. That's all it is, piano and vocals. It's made up of 11 solo McCartney songs, all performed with a jazzy twist. And there are covers of very deep McCartney tracks, including, probably because of Kit's book, the song we were singing, Single Pigeon, Jenny Wren, Women and Wives, Calico Skies. Get this, If I Take You Home Tonight, the song that Paul gave to Diana Krall to record, and When the Wind is Blowing.
That's amazing. All
on this new collection.
Check that
If you're
out.
interested, you can go to the website for Max Comeau, talkmoresolotalk.com, and you will find it there. The group known as Theater Within, they have been doing John Lennon tribute shows every year since his passing. The 43rd annual John Lennon tribute will take place on December the 2nd at City Hall in New York City, and headlining the show will be Graham Nash. Along with that, Judy Collins will perform, Rita Coolidge, the Kennedys, Willie Nile, Roseanne Cash, and Mark Cohen. If you want more information, you can go to lennontribute.org. And we also have, just a few weeks away, the Chicago Fest for Beatles fans, happening August 11th through the 13th at the Hyatt Regency O'Hare. Special guests include Greg Bissonette, Jay Bergen, Patty Boyd, Billy J. Kramer, Joey Molland, Terry Sylvester. And for more information, you can go to thefest.com. Also, authors such as Kit, who will be on many panels, Alan Kozin, my friend over from Things We Said Today, my fellow co-host, Ken Womack, of course, will be there, and Al Sussman. And you have some information you want to pass along, Kit?
Yes, I am indeed going to be on many panels representing us, and also Toppermost of the Poppermost, and Talk More Talk is indeed going to have a panel there. Unfortunately, my co-hosts aren't going to be able to make it, but Ken Womack is pinch hitting, and he's an adjunct member anyway, a founding member, in fact. So we are going to have a sequel to the panel we did last year. We're going to do another Wrack Our Brains, and we are welcoming back the terrific group of authors that we had last year: Piers Hemmingson, Chuck Gunderson, and Al Sussman. And we had such a good time doing that last year. We thought, hey, we gotta do it again. And so we need all of your help out there. We'd like you to send us your questions. Now, as you remember with you guys, that it is not trivia. You know, as you remember, this is not, you're not going to try and stump us with, how many times Paul blew his nose during the recording of yesterday. It's nothing like that. Okay.
Two.
Yeah, 2. Well, very good. I thought it was 3. But anyway, so
a lot of people think that.
I know.
He dreamed the third one. Dreamed the third one. That's what he did.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
He dreamed a lot, didn't he?
Yeah, he did.
Yeah,
He dreamed a lot. And so these are opinion questions, and we're kind of, because this is Beatle Fest, we're kind of expanding the scope here. So they can be solo questions, but they can be Beatles questions as well. So these are strictly opinion based. So you can post your questions right in the comments to this video. So again, they have to be in before August 11th, because that's the beginning of the fest. I don't know what time the panel is going to be yet. As soon as I know that information, I will of course post it right on our Facebook page. I'll probably post it on our YouTube channel as well, so everybody knows. And we definitely hope to see you there. It'll be a lot of fun. And I hope to see you. I'll have an author table there, and I hope to see you on all the other panels. I'll post those as well as soon as I have the information. So it'll be a blast.
Okay. Very good, Kit. We're just going to close with a few passings that we have to mention here. We mourn the loss of singer, actress, and fashion icon Jane Birkin. Now, she is known for her personal and artistic relationship with songwriter Serge Gainsbourg, and for her Beatles connections. There are actually 2 of them. She played the main role in the film Wonderwall of the very attractive model that lives next door to an eccentric scientist, played by Jack McGowan, who was like a peeping Tom looking for Jane through a hole in the wall between them. The 1968 movie had George Harrison do the film score, and ironically, Jane Birkin's character name in the film was Penny Lane. Not the only movie to have a character named Penny Lane, mind you. You know what I'm thinking of? Almost Famous.
Right. Yeah.
Kate Hudson's character was Penny Lane. Anyway, George, Patty Boyd, Ringo, and wife Maureen and Jane Birkin were seen together at the Cannes Film Festival for Wonderwall. But there's one other connection.
Yes.
She and husband Serge had a daughter,
Yep.
Charlotte,
Yep.
for whom Paul McCartney wrote a song and played piano, guitar, additional drums, and probable bass for the song Songbird in a Cage, released in 2017, which I've talked about, I think, on Two Legs with you and Andy.
Yeah, it's an amazing record. I love the whole thing. I mean, the Songbird in a Cage is fantastic, but the rest of the album is fantastic.
I didn't hear the rest of her album. I only heard the one song.
Yeah, it's really good. I mean,
Yeah.
the music is great. I mean, she's singing in French, but the Songbird in a Cage is the only song sung in English. But I really enjoy the record.
Yeah. When I heard it, I thought she sounded a lot like Linda.
Yep.
Vocally. Also, we note the death of Mo Foster. He was a multi-instrumentalist, probably best known as a bass player. He played on 8 of the 10 songs on Ringo's Old Wave album, and he was one of 4 co-writers for In My Car with Ringo, Joe Walsh, and Kim Goody. He died from cancer on July the 3rd at the age of 78. Finally, we note the passing of Dick Biondi, who was a legendary voice of Top 40 radio in Chicago, who is believed to be the first American DJ to play a Beatles record when he played Please Please Me on Chicago's WLS in February of 1963. It's believed he is. I don't want to go on record and say definitely he is, because you get all kinds of reports out there. And I do know that in California, Please Please Me was played when it was released on VJ here, but I don't know the exact date. So who was really first? But certainly Dick Biondi was one of the first. It's safe to say that. The Chicago Sun-Times reported that at his peak at Top 40 powerhouse WLS from 1960 to 1963, Biondi had a 60% share of all listeners, attracting millions of teens in 38 states and Canada. He had a 67-year career and was inducted into the National Radio Hall of Fame in 1998. And Dick Biondi died on June the 26th at the age of 90. And I know that, Kit, you wanted to say something because you grew up listening to him.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not exaggerating when I say he was a legend here. I mean, he was on the radio for, I mean, generations listened to him, and me included. And in high school, in the 80s, when I was really learning about music from the 50s and 60s, I would listen to a station that he was on. This was, of course, long after his WLS days. That was called Magic 104, WJMK. If there's Chicago listeners out there, you'll probably remember this station, 104.3. And he was on there a lot, and I would listen to him, and he would talk about these different artists. Freddie Boom Boom Cannon, I remember talking about him, and and learning about all these people, and I considered him one of my music teachers. And so I this was kind of another case of this wasn't a surprise. He'd been sick, unfortunately, for a while, but felt very sad. I mean, this was kind of a personal loss for me, because, as I said, I felt like he was one of my teachers and taught me all about 50s and 60s music. So he's a legend here. He did come to Beatle Fest once. He did. Unfortunately, he was a little frail by that point, so he didn't stay as long as he could have. Would have normally, I should say. But never got to meet him formally. But what a loss for Chicago. It's a sad day, and a loss for music. But he's got that place in Beatles history and in rock history in general. So great loss.
Yeah, having grown up with legendary Top 40 DJs in New York City, I know what it's like when they're like part of your family.
Yeah.
They introduced all this music to you that become part of who you are. And so, my heart goes out to all the Chicago listeners. And, he was big all over the country.
Yep.
So,
he sure was.
Yeah, a giant for sure.
Yeah.
And that's all the news this time.
Whew.
We had a lot to catch up on.
Well, I'm trying to get myself going. I'm going to rip it up, and I'm going to try to like get to stand
Here
by
come the
me,
puns.
folks. Yeah, stand
Yeah.
by me. We're slipping and sliding into it now. Okay, let's just. Okay, let's get started. All right. So our main topic. Well, the two albums we're going to discuss: John Lennon's rock and roll album from 1975, and Paul McCartney's album CHOBA CCCP, aka the Russian album, released in 1988. Now, when we were going to do this, we were thinking, well, what about Run Devil Run? And some people had asked in comments, are you going to do Run Devil Run also? I just felt that one by each for the first show would be good, because you have the John's first and then Paul's first. Run Devil Run. I think if we were going to be talking about Run Devil Run, I'd have a lot of different things to say than I do tonight about this, but that's just me. Well, so I was thinking as the moderator, how was I going to handle this, and I thought, well, maybe first let's talk about just some basic things about each album, one at a time, with a little history. We don't have to get into the songs yet. Just like a history and what impressions, first impressions of things. So I thought, like Rock and Roll by John, was released in February of '75, but of course it had a crazy history where it started out being produced by Phil Spector, and the sessions in October of 1973, and then there were all kinds of craziness with Spector, as people who knew him could attest to. A lot of crazy things go on, and then John had to finish it off a year later, in like October of '74, and then we had the Morris Levy suit, because John had been sued for copyright infringement because of a line in "Come Together," where he was singing "Here Come Old Flat Top," which is actually from a Chuck Berry song, "You Can't Catch Me." And as part of an agreement and a settlement, John was told, and he agreed to record 3 Morris Levy-owned songs on his rock and roll album, which he did. And then we have a whole nother thing where an album was put out on television by Adam 8 Limited without John's permission. Before John's album ever came out, you got this thing called John Lennon Sings the Great Rock and Roll Hits, called Roots for short, the Roots album. And it had some tracks that like Angel Baby and I think Be My Baby, which weren't even ultimately wouldn't appear on John's finished release.
The ugliest cover ever, too.
Oh, I was just gonna say that. God awful.
Yeah. I'm not very. I'm not. It's not one of my favorites. I have to concur. But then there was the whole thing with now John's got to like sue and I know there's been shows on this. Ken did a fantastic show that I listened to, and you could talk a little, just very little about that. Ken, the author of the book, Jay,
Jay Bergen, who will be a guest at the Fest for Beatles Fans in Chicago, as I mentioned before. And, he's been very active at the Fest doing interviews remotely. This time, though, he'll be there in person.
Yeah.
But, he was John's defense attorney throughout this whole thing. And his book, Lennon, the Mobster and the Lawyer, takes you through the entire history of it all, and even has transcriptions of what people said in court. Everything that John said in court and how well he handled himself. But it was a bit of a nuisance that John had to deal with this in the middle of all, because just not because he had to stop the sessions for rock and roll, he didn't resume them for another year, because Phil Spector held on to the tapes, the master tapes. And once Al Corey from Capitol Records was able to get them and send them to John, did things pick up again. And that was a year later at the record plant East. And John finished recording rock and roll after he recorded Walls and Bridges. But everything about the court case is covered in that book. And and you find out in the end that Morris Levy ended up losing a lot of money in the whole case. Just the hassle of what John went through and how Morris Levy and his lawyer wasn't even prepared when they were in the courts, how to handle themselves. It's a fascinating thing. It's taking advantage of John because of his celebrity status and being a Beatle, and but it's definitely a book I would recommend you're getting. And if you can, check out the interviews that I've done on my channel and also on Things We Said Today. Jay was a guest as well.
Mhm.
But yeah, it's an interesting. It's a part of history that you knew a little bit about, but now you know the whole story because of Jay Bergen.
Yeah, and that the so-called bogus television record, Roots for short,
Mhm.
it's a real collector's item if you can get an original. I still haven't found an original. I have a
Right.
counterfeit,
I
as
saw,
most of us do.
yeah, I saw
But
one at one of my local record stores for $100,
was
Wow.
it
and I wasn't going to
what
pay that. Yeah, I
was you weren't? Oh, you have a counterfeit thing, right?
Yeah.
I know. But
I
for
have
me,
a
I would have. You
counterfeit.
should have told me. I would have got it.
Yeah.
It was proven original. I would have taken it. But
Yeah,
Yeah.
that's not actually a bad price.
not bad for
Yeah.
that if it's original. But
Yeah.
yeah. So anyway, now I know I love the cover of the rock and roll album. I don't think anybody would dispute that.
Mm.
An early Hamburg shot in black and white, John in the doorway, Jürgen Vollmer taking that picture. Oh, it fits the album so well.
Oh.
And before we go into too much about it, I thought at first, like I like to do, and as we usually do, when we first heard of the album or heard it, seen it. I know for me, I didn't really become like a solo collector until around 78, 79, with Bad Boy, the Ringo album of all things, and the self-titled George Harrison album. So I didn't get that when it was new, but I do. I have this memory of it being in some kind of, it was weird. We had a little store. It was this little novelty shop, not a big department store. And they sold like model kits and model paint and all kinds of accessories and things. And I just remember seeing that album there, and the cover was so cool at the time, even to me as like a pretty young at the time. I just thought that's cool. That's John Lennon and the Beatles. It's before I became a real diehard fanatic, but I remember
Mm.
seeing it. So Ken, we all like to start. We kind of go, I guess, more or less with the older ones. You and I, so I concluded me. I know I look young, but I'm not.
Wow.
Relatively young.
We're the youngins.
And I'm also I'm modest too. No, seriously. So I know you are familiar with a lot of the albums. You were really into it from the beginning with the solo albums. You were getting them pretty much as they were coming out, or you remember them when they were coming out.
Well, certainly from say 1970 through 73, I got the solo albums pretty close to when they were released, maybe not the day of the release, but 73 was like the awakening for me. That's when I got everything when it came out, exactly when it came out. But what I do remember a lot about this particular time, it was an exciting time because there was so much product coming out from the solo Beatles in 73 and 74, and rock and roll was only a few months after Walls and Bridges. So this is like, wow, this is a lot of music coming out from John, and I was really excited about it. I didn't really know anything about the Morris Levy lawsuit. I don't even think it was mentioned all that much in the papers. As a matter of fact, that is one thing that is brought up in Jay Bergen's book, is the fact that it got no publicity. And here's John Lennon getting sued, and there's nothing in the papers about it. So, yeah, but I was very excited about this because this flurry of music from John. I've always kind of, unfortunately, looked at albums like Rock and Roll or CHOBA B, CCCP, not as important as albums where it's all original material. I've come to think differently since then because this is all music that the Beatles grew up on and that they loved. So it's important for us to know that too. Right. But I really enjoyed rock and roll when it first came out, despite the fact that it's, all unoriginal, it's all covers. But it was an exciting time because I liked just about everything on the album when it came out, and still do. And I liked the production behind it and didn't know about all the problems with Phil Spector until John gave interviews about it.
Yeah.
which was right around the time when the album came out. But even still, I wasn't super critical of the production of Phil Spector. I still am not. But I remember that time because of so much solo music coming out, like from 73 through 75. There's a lot of music all at once. And with John Walls and Bridges back to back. But also, rock and roll came out so early because of Roots being released, and because the sales would have really hurt the sales of rock and roll probably the later that you put it out, with Roots being out there, although that was recalled very quickly too. So, everything had to be rushed out, and John had to finish the album in the studio to make sure, because they'd heard about what Morris Levy was planning to do. So, a lot going on all at once, but to me, still a very exciting time because of so much music coming out and because I really liked what I heard.
I've always wondered, because he started it in 1973, and I remember one time hearing some interview with John from the many where he said, well, I remember getting into the idea when it was a new idea. He said something like that, like the 50s and all this, because if he had gotten it done and taken care of rather quickly and it came out, say, in 74 or earlier, you had American Graffiti in 73 and Happy Days in 74. I think it actually might have had more of a boost had it come out in the Happy Days era when that premiered, and more of the 50s thing. I'm not going to say the 50s craze was over by 1975, but it really was, really at its peak, I think around 73 and 4, as I remember it as a kid, seeing the movie American Graffiti, and then Happy Days when it premiered. So I'll just say quickly, I don't know when I don't have a memory of when I finally got it. It was one of those fill in the gaps albums, and to me, I like it much better now than I did then. It's grown on me more over the years. I think I still feel it's probably my least favorite of John's, all his official albums, not the including the experimental things, the regular albums, only really because it's not original material. I enjoy the album now, but yeah, at first it took a while for me to get into it. I enjoy it, but we'll talk more about the individual songs as we go on. So, how about you, Tom? What's your first memory of that album, Rock and Roll?
Well, first let me just say that I am not the biggest fan of 50s and early 60s music, to be honest with you. There's some that I like. I do like a wide range of Little Richard songs, but to be honest with you, there's a bunch that I'm just, I'll listen to, but I'm not, going out and buying that stuff, era music. Anyways, that being said, this shirt, you know what this is from?
Sure.
The Imagine John Lennon film.
Yeah.
So the first song I heard from that album would have been "Stand by Me," which was on the soundtrack. Then I got the book for Christmas, and then his discography is in there. So that's where I learned where that song was from. However, I didn't get the album until 2004, to be honest with you, when this was released.
Yeah, we got to talk about that mix too, that improved mix.
Yeah, right. So this is when I bought this in 2004. That's the first time that I heard the whole album. And like I said, I was not in a hurry to get this, to be honest with you, because again, I just that era of music is not my favorite. So playing it though, I mean, it's enjoyable. I mean, listen, Lennon has some really strong vocals on this record, and but it's not one that I rush to grab when I go on a drive or on the way to work or whatever. So, but for me, it's enjoyable, but it's I'll just leave it at that.
No, I fully get you. Okay, Kid, and you?
Positively negative, as I like to say.
Okay.
Well, I've been trying to think of when I first picked up, and it may have been around the time that Imagine the documentary came out and Stand by Me was on it, but I got the original I mean, I got it long before 2004, so I got the original mix, and I probably got it on cassette. I think I did, because, you know, being an 80s kid, I had it on cassette. And I was excited to get it, because I am a 50s rock and roll geek, and a couple of people in the comments have taken my classes, so they know that. And early 60s. And so I was excited, because, I mean, hey, this is John Lennon, one of the best rock voices ever. And so I thought, this is going to be great. You know, and Stand By Me, of course, is a great cover. We'll get to all that in a minute.
Yeah.
I initially didn't really care for it very much. I kind of thought it was a missed opportunity, because I didn't like the mix. Well, we'll get to the remaster in a while, as you said, Joe. I didn't care for the mix. I also was not a big fan of Phil Spector at the time. I've changed my opinion of him over time, though. And I just thought some of it sounded a little rushed. I just thought it was not as good as I was expecting it to be. You know, I had a very high bar set, you know, for the album. So for a long time, I didn't really play it very much, because I just thought, oh, this could have been so much better. But as we talk tonight, and as I've listened to it over the years, I've changed my opinion on some of the songs. So we'll, you know, talk about. But at the time when I first heard it, I just was like, you know, not as good as I thought it was going to be.
And I don't know what it was, why at first I wasn't that wild about it. I'm beginning to think maybe we should go through some songs now when we're talking about it. After all, I don't want to take time away from Paul's. You know, we're going to do all Paul's album, and then maybe, you know, join together some thoughts together on them. Because we might as well just run down a few favorites. I mean, for me, I love "Stand By Me" on the album. It's my favorite. I like it even better than the classic. Well, I like the classic version too, of course. But at first, I used to think that, I don't know, even as a John fan, even I thought his vocals, when I first heard this at the younger times, I just thought they weren't as powerful as like some of his best Beatles rockers. But I don't feel that way anymore. But at first I was like, yeah, it seems like John's a little more laid back than I'd expect him to, or trying too hard or something. Don't feel that way these days when I listen to it. But as far as tracks go, I think we should, let's just spend some time to talk about highlights, what we liked on the album. If there's a few you don't like, you know, you think are poor, I'm open for that, you know. But let's go, Kid. I'm going to bounce back to you again. Let's go.
Well, as you said, Stand By Me is great. I love the Rip It Up, Ready Teddy medley. I think, you know, to me, that's what I wish the whole album had been like. I mean, I just sound like he's just sounding like he's having a ball with this. You know, the horns are tight. It's just a classic. Slipping and sliding. I love that's another one. That was one that when I first heard it, I immediately was drawn to. You know, John's vocals again are just, you know, I love that raspiness he gets, and of course, you know, I love horns, and so that was you guys know that. Love his rendition of Peggy Sue. You can hear his reverence for Buddy Holly on this. I mean, no doubt about it. And I just, you know, and I mean, it's a straightforward tribute, no doubt about it. He doesn't really, you know, he's not trying to reimagine it. Now, the one I think I like that he does reimagine is Boney Maroney. You know, I think he slows it down a bit, but and it's a bit bluesier, a little grittier, but I think it works. You know, I think I like his little bit of a bluesier, you know, a little sexier vibe that he has on this, and I think it works on the whole. You know, at first I wasn't sure, but I've really come around on that. But probably the worst track for me.
What you're gonna say, I'll bet.
Just Because.
I thought that was one of two.
Yep. I just, yeah, that really was, I just felt he did it as a throwaway, and I just thought, oh, come on, that's a great song. What did you do?
Yeah, yeah.
He picked the wrong just because. Is what he did.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Oh, they're
you
both,
got it.
both great songs.
Yeah, but it just,
Well,
but it
that's
just,
true. But it worked. I think it works as a closer on it.
Mhm.
yeah.
And this is a good time for me to say it. I love at the end when he goes, and I don't have it exact. And so we say farewell to record plant, etc. And he said he later he didn't know at the time, but is this him really saying goodbye to the business? Because he took a break after that.
Right.
Anyway,
Yeah.
throw that in there.
But
Yeah, all
yeah.
right. So those are some.
But the rest, but those are the highlights for me.
Those are the
Yeah.
highlights. Okay. And Tom, how about you?
I echo what Kit said. I mean, "Stand by Me" I think is the highlight of the the album. I think they did a great job, picking that as the lead off. Was the lead off single, right? There was another
Right.
single too.
Yeah.
Well, Slippin' and Slidin' was
Slidin'.
supposed to
Slippin'
be a
Slidin'.
second single.
Yeah, I
Yeah.
don't
they
think they had
canceled.
another one, did
Well, I think they did that in another country because I have the
Yeah,
single. But yeah, I do love "Stand by Me." I do like the "Slipping and Sliding." I do like the I like the "Ain't That a Shame." I think that's not bad. I do like the Little Richard "Rip It Up" and "Ready Teddy" little medley. I think that's a standout as well. But again, I mean, the rest of the tracks, I think, comparing the two, when we get to that, I mean, I'm going to find that I prefer the other track listing. Not saying that those songs are better. I'm just saying I prefer the track listing to this track listing, which, again, and he was supposed to do 3 Chuck Berry songs, right? And did he even do 3? I see
You
2
Can't
here. I don't
Catch
even know.
Me, Sweet Little
Little
16.
16.
Right.
I think that's it.
And
But
I
wait a
think
minute.
that's it.
Are you referring to the Morris Levy 3 songs?
Maybe there was
Yeah.
another one. That
They
was
didn't
not
have
Chuck
to
Berry.
all be Chuck Berry.
They
Right.
didn't
Because-
have to be okay. They just had
No.
to be Chuck Berry songs. Okay.
No,
I'm
Morris
pretty
Levy,
sure-
Levy
Yeah.
owned songs.
You
Yeah,
Can't Catch Me
okay.
had to be in there. But the
Right,
other 2 were supposed to be Angel Baby.
Okay. More.
And John didn't
Right.
like the recording of Angel Baby.
Gotcha.
Why he didn't put it
Which
on
is-
the album. And
I
yeah,
like it now. And I love it
Well,
now.
see, and that's what that was my next comment is okay. So I didn't hear it originally, so I got the 2004, which has the bonus cuts on there that has Angel Baby on there, which is a damn shame that song is not that didn't make the final cut, because I think that's really good. And however, the one I wish he never redid, because he did it perfect the first time, and that is "To Know Her Is to Love Her." I really wish he didn't go back and do that one, because I thought what he did back in, what was it, for BBC?
that's priceless.
Was
Yeah.
oh,
That was, yeah.
One of my
yeah.
favorite BBC
You know,
recordings.
I like it on there very much.
yeah.
Yes,
Yeah, what he did then compared to the update, yeah. But yeah, but yeah, I mean, look, there's some really good stuff on here, but it's far and few between, unfortunately.
I got you. Well, I just want to chime in and say, one of the songs that I like that I don't think anybody's mentioned yet, and a lot of people hate this version, I think, is the version of "Sweet Little 16" that's on here. That's nothing like the rocking, kind of Chuck Berry one. I love the arrangement. I just love it. And I remember, I always tell the story where I remember listening to, I think it's the Dennis Elsas interview, or was it? No, it might have been the one with Scott Muni. I don't know what it was, but there's one when he's playing the song. Probably was Scott Muni, because that was later. Anyway, he goes, "That's the dancehall version," he says, or something like that, of that song. I just like the different arrangement. Sometimes they work for me, sometimes they don't, and he really does a lot of good, like intense screaming. Later on, or getting really into the song. I just like his delivery on that song. So that's a standout for me personally. I think I'm on a small island with that. I got to call. Oh, thank you.
I love that version, Joe.
Oh, good. So I don't feel so bad. Maybe I will do a tango or something with it.
Maybe later.
It takes two. And I love "Stand by Me," as I said. "Bebop-A-Lula," I actually love that as an opener, and I like this. I usually don't like a lot of that echoey stuff and that quality that he puts on his over his vocals. I kind of like that slight
Yeah.
reverby sound to that. I love his version of "You Can't Catch Me." You know, I just wish it was clearer. I wish the production had been better on a lot of these, which was cleared up on the
Yeah.
clearer version. I think the 2004 it was
Yeah.
CD. That's a really good remix to that. If people want to check that out, along with the Mind Games mix around that era too,
Yeah.
was really good as CD. Ain't That a Shame is fun. I like that. Slipping and Sliding, I love John's version of that. I
Yeah.
think it's terrific. Boney Maroney, that's the one song I might have heard the original once. I don't, but I'm not familiar with it. I mean, I love
Mhm.
50s and early 60s music.
Mhm.
Unlike Tom, but I think that's because when I was a boy, my mother had all those 45s, and when I used to play my little Mickey Mouse record player, I played all the 45s. So I was listening to stuff like Little Star by the Elegants and
Yeah.
things like that, and all kinds of things, and some Bobby Rydell, Ken,
Yes. Thank
listening
you.
to, and I was playing like "Little Bitty Girl" was one of the songs. I think that's a B-side actually. It was a little, so I got an appreciation. And she took me to see American Graffiti, The Lords of Flatbush, and
Mhm.
one time they had the film documentary "Let the Good Times Roll" running along with one of those as a double feature. So I had an early music diet of that stuff. And those are the highlights for me, actually. The other ones, there's nothing I really don't like on it now. But as I say, for me, I'm going to say it's probably my least favorite John album of all. I like "Sometime in New York City" better.
Hmm.
Sorry, that's
Yeah.
Um, but I enjoy it. And I'm going to say this that it's my least favorite because I want it to be fair when we get to the next album that
Sure.
we talk
Right.
about. So, Ken,
Uh,
please. Oh,
Hold
yes,
on,
sir.
Ken, if you don't mind, real quick. John made an interesting point that I
Yeah.
was actually going to say this, but I forgot to because I didn't write it down. He said the acoustic guitar on "Stand By Me" reminds him of the acoustic guitar John plays on Ringo's version of "Only You,"
Mm,
which I do find it to
Yeah.
be pretty similar.
Okay. Yeah.
So,
Yeah. That's
but
a
I
Ken,
good
agree.
go ahead.
point.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Yeah.
And we all know that the reason why Ringo did Only You was that it
Right.
was John's
It was
suggestion
John.
in the first place. So
Yes.
yeah.
Yeah.
But for me, I like most of this album. The funny thing about this is that, I heard about Phil Spector producing it, and then later on you learn that on the actual album when it first came out, there's only 4 songs that were the Phil Spector productions that he, and you could really tell when you start off with Bebop Alula and it's much leaner in production, and Stand By
Yeah.
Me is much leaner. And then you get You Can't Catch Me, which has the, Wall of Sound and Sweet Little 16. But that still doesn't bother me at all. I think that there's a lot of fun on this album. And my favorite songs, this will make it easier. There's only 2 songs on there that I don't really care for. And that's Do You Want to Dance? Even though I
Yeah.
like the
I
song a
agree.
lot. I don't
Mm.
know if a reggae arrangement really works for that.
Doesn't
Yeah.
work.
That's one of the weaker ones. I'll agree.
And
Yep.
Ya, which is a fun track, but I don't know if this arrangement, I don't think he put a lot of
No.
work behind the arrangement on it.
I
But
agree.
one of the things I like that he did with Phil Spector, I like when he slows the songs down from what the original
Mm.
hits were like, because it brings out his voice even more. And when he screams and he's got that great rock and roll voice, it's even more pronounced. So Sweet Little 16 really benefits from being a bit slower than the Chuck Berry version. Or I love Just Because, we all know John had one of the greatest rock and roll voices, and certainly it shows on this album on so many of the songs. Stand By Me is priceless. It's a perfect recording of Stand By Me. Listen to John's vocals when he's doing the chorus. It's
Yeah.
so powerful. I love Ain't That a Shame a lot. I love the whole piano part, which really, fills out the whole sound of the song and is a big, focal instrument of Ain't That a Shame. Slipping and Sliding kicks mighty butt. It is one
Yes.
of the,
Mm.
it could be my favorite recording on the whole album. It
Yep.
really rocks.
That's
And
awesome.
I do wish it had been released as a single here in the States, even though Stand By Me only went as far as number 20. You made a very good point, Joe, about, this album, that the 50s revival was happening around the time with American Graffiti and Happy Days. And maybe this album might have done a little bit better if it did come out in 73, but the 50s revival was still continuing. Even after this, Linda Ronstadt had some hits with Buddy Holly songs, so it still continued on in the 70s. But yeah, Slippin' and Sliding's great. Peggy Sue is phenomenal. I love the medley of Bring It On Home to Me and Send Me Some Lovin'. Those two songs
that's
really
good.
flow.
That's a good mesh.
Yeah, good. Yeah, they go well together.
Yeah. And, I think You Can't Catch Me, I like a lot, but I think it goes on too long. It's about 5 minutes long. Boney Maroney, I like a lot for the same reasons as I like Sweet Little 16 and Just Because. Slowing it down, maybe that should have been trimmed a little bit, Boney Maroney. But most of the album I do enjoy. I think Bebop-A-Lula is a great song to open with. And I also think, for historical reasons, when you listen to these songs that are important to John and we're going to talk about Paul, it's a part of their history. Just like 20 Flat Rock was such a big part of Beatle history. Yeah. These songs have special meaning to them. Although I did hear that with rock and roll that Phil Spector chose some of the material, but I think John wouldn't have done it if he didn't. Anyway.
Yeah.
So, but overall, it's a very enjoyable album. And if there's only one or two songs that I didn't really care for, it's so worthwhile to listen to. And I like the whole production of it. I like the Phil Spector production. I like the wall of sound. I like all those horns. You read that there were some times when they had more than 30 musicians in the studio. That's a lot to put on one, but that was what Phil Spector was known for in that wall of sound of his. But I think it worked on the songs that he worked on with John. And I like when John held back and had leaner production too.
Real quick though, it wasn't Slippin' and Sliding. It was actually in France. Bebop-A-Lula was released as.
I have that one. That's the one I was looking for to put with my John Lennon rock and roll comb that came promotional item. Frame that in that little 45 sleeve. I'm gonna put it in there. But I wanted to say I much prefer the original version of Yeah. Was that Dorsey?
Lee Dorsey.
Lee Dorsey.
Mm-hmm.
I think it's a lot of fun, the original. And I mean, I just like the arrangement. I don't care for John's version of that too much.
I don't either. And I admit it's not my all-time favorite song, period. But I like the original better. I didn't think this version worked. Yeah.
An Angel Baby, which I mentioned before briefly. I mean, now I love that track. I wish it was on the album now. It's one of my favorite of the tracks. I really love the version that came out on Give Me Some Truth. That's really cleaned up. And even a part was removed from it. I'm trying to remember. At the beginning, he says, this here is one of my favorite songs. He says at the beginning of the introduction as it's starting. It's nice to have that, but I didn't mind it being cut out the way it's presented now without that dialogue at the beginning. It works without it too. It was nice to have it before, but it really was spruced up, I think. So, all right. Well,
it's interesting. It's interesting to note what John didn't put on the album. Not just Angel Baby, but Since My Baby Left Me, Be My Baby. That version. And To Know Her Is to Love Her.
Yeah.
That version of To Know Her Is to Love Her is kind of ragged.
Yeah, it's dirgy.
Yeah, that didn't work.
Yeah. So, all right, should we move on to Paul album? All right. CHOBA B, CCCP. Now, is that translated to back in the USSR or something close to that?
It's supposed to mean that.
Yeah.
And the actual pronunciation, I hope I get it right, is supposed to be Snova V SSSR.
Okay.
Okay. I got you.
But still, when I do my radio show,
CCCR. Okay, I don't know. AKA the Russian album.
I'll just stick with that.
Yeah.
And the reason that they call it that is because the idea originally was that Paul wanted to uh, have this out in the Soviet Union exclusively, originally. Anyway, the
Mhm.
first release, and it was released there October 31st, 1988. And now my research tells me that the first press, I think 400,000 copies only, but the first press was only 50,000
Mhm.
copies, and that had
Right.
11 tracks on it. And then
Right.
later on, right, it was second press a month later had two additional tracks.
Right.
So I guess if you have it with 11 tracks, that's more original than,
Right.
you know.
So yeah, so the one that he re-released there, what, in 19, this has the same track listing as that original Russian release.
Yeah, and we
Say
didn't.
that again. Wait, Tom.
But
Yeah,
That one right
this
there.
is the yeah, this is the 2019 re-release.
Okay.
Um and it has the same track listing as that original Russian
The 11
release.
tracks.
Yes, yes.
Okay.
Okay.
All right.
Same order, same track listing. Yes.
Okay.
And I don't know. I mean, people speculate that after Press to Play, I didn't do as well as Paul would have liked. The reception to him, that he went in with Phil Ramone, working with that producer,
Right.
and Once Upon a Long Ago, which I love. I
Hmm.
really wish it
Mhm.
had more exposure. I love Once Upon a Long Ago and Back on My Feet, which I also love.
Yeah.
Fantastic.
I love both of those. Those came out of that, and there were 20 songs done for this album. I guess Paul just wanted to do oldies, and I don't know, maybe drown himself in the oldies, do live recording right in the studio. And there's 20 songs that were done. And what's some of the other ones that were not, like I Wanna Cry was not
Well,
issued
That's an
you
original.
B-side.
got
It's
you
the
don't
one
have
that's what he wrote. Yes, the
I
originals.
Want to Cry is the original, yeah, but then you've got songs like I'm in Love Again, you've got I'm Gonna Be a Wheel Someday,
There's
Summertime,
also
It's
yeah,
Now or
yeah.
Never, as an
It's Now or
Elvis.
It's Now or
Never.
Never, which ended up on the Last Temptation of
Of
Elvis
course.
double
Of
album.
Elvis. Yeah.
Which I like
Yeah.
that I like Paul's version of that very much, but I think maybe because it sounds close to me to Elvis, that version. I don't know, but I like that very much. Yeah. So this has like an interesting history too. Wow, and one
Well,
thing
you
I
could
think.
also the Americans could have, or not Americans, but people who were members of the Club Sandwich, they could have ordered it as well. So
Yeah,
Oh.
if you were not in Russia, you had the opportunity to get
yeah.
it if you were a member of the Club Sandwich.
Oh, I
In
didn't
fact,
know that.
I have a copy. One of the copies I have of the Russian album has the club sandwich with it.
Mm.
Yeah,
Hmm.
as a an extra bonus thing that I picked up.
Hmm.
Yes.
But one thing I was gonna, I have to bounce back. One thing we didn't say about John's rock and roll album, and I'll tie this in, is I didn't realize until I was doing some research here that it had got up to number 6 on the charts in both UK and the US. The
Hmm.
rock and roll album. I didn't know it made it that high.
Yeah.
It's
So
Mhm.
respectable.
you
Yeah,
know, um,
absolutely.
yeah, for an album like that. But I just happened to, I mean, because I was looking at my chart information here for this. Um, you know, we should also mention, I should mention that it came out internationally, right? But that wasn't until 1991,
Yeah.
Right.
which is that's quite a while when you think
Right.
about
Mhm.
it.
However, people who bought the CD singles and singles from Paul McCartney, we got a lot of that stuff
Yeah.
during on
Mhm.
CD singles. If you bought the
Yeah,
12-inch single of Once Upon a Long Ago, you got 2 tracks from these sessions, and then
yeah,
if you
yeah,
bought
yeah. Right.
singles from Flowers in the Dirt, you got a bunch of these tracks as well.
My Brave
Don't get her.
Face had
Don't
bonus
get
songs
Yeah.
around
on it.
much
Yep.
anymore. I think one
Yeah.
of them like.
Yep.
Yeah,
Hmm.
yeah. I remember those were some fun days for me getting these import
Yeah.
12-inch records with the different tracks like that on
Yeah.
there. But the charts for this in the 1991 uh worldwide release, it was number 63 in the UK and
Mm.
109 in the US.
Right.
Yikes.
So that wasn't one of the better showings. Now, what happened in Russia with this? Was it
Mm.
number 1 in Russia? When it first
I
came
don't-
out, but I thought
Yeah.
that was the case with that.
I don't have any information on that. but-
Well, what I remember about this album, we'll just talk about how we first remember it and stuff, is that this is a real rare album. If you want to get it, how you going to get it? I didn't have Club Sandwich. I should have,
Hmm.
but I remember going into Manhattan in Greenwich Village, and they had people selling it there on the sidewalks. There were the albums on the sidewalk, or they had shops too, so you didn't have to buy it on the side. There were record shops, and that's I think how I got my first copy of it. It was like, oh, this is the rare McCartney album, and I can tell you, I'll start it off this way. I do not like this album at all, really. There's a few tracks I can tolerate. I just don't know what it is. I'm trying to put my finger on it. It's an album that I don't play much. I think I played maybe two times, and then when the CD came out later, worldwide, I played it again. I don't go back to this at all. First, we have the factor that, for me, again, it's not the original work by Paul. That and being up isn't the whole reason. I mean, I still like covers, and the Beatles do the stuff so well. But in this case, I putting my finger on it. I don't know. I just don't. I think I'm not as wild about Paul's voice on this or the arrangements of them. He sounds like let's just get in there and do it, which sometimes works. Sometimes you get in there and just record it and do them, and the spontaneity works. But there's something about it. I don't know. It seems a little. I don't want to say the wrong words because I can't put my finger on it.
Well-
A little more half-hearted for Paul, maybe. Yeah.
Well,
Well-
for me, it's the mix. I think. I mean, a lot of these songs sound like they're being played in an empty music hall.
Right.
Some of the
in my
guitars
opinion.
I heard in the
Yeah.
back, like they weren't.
Right. So it doesn't.
Wow.
I mean, if you were to compare this to like Run Devil Run, I mean, Run Devil Run will kick this album's ass, in my opinion.
Yeah.
But
That's what I want to say to save face here, folks, McCartney fans.
right.
I love Run Devil Run. If we were talking about that, to me, that might beat out both albums. Easy.
Right.
John and
So
Paul.
for me, it's the production. I think the track listing for me is better than the rock and roll. However, the production on this, it sounds a little off. I don't know if it was meant to be heard like that or not. But that's the one thing that for me kind of lessens the enjoyment of this record for me.
What is it about? I mean, there's the song, I think, Cracking Up Now. This is my moment to make a fool of myself here, because I don't know how to describe the vocal thing that I'm talking about. There's something Paul does, bear with me, where he'll say something, have this voice where I don't know how to say it otherwise than try to sing it. He kind of does this thing like, here's the words, I don't even know the words. I do your laundry and your cooking too. What more woman
sings a
can a
little
man like me
deeper.
do? He does this kind of, oh my God, you understand? Yeah, why does he do that? You know what I'm saying? Anybody know what I'm saying? I don't like when he does that. He does that. I don't know why. 3, 5, 4, 5, 6, 7, 5, 8, 9. Just sing it, the right way. When he does that, I don't like it. It's a personal thing, and I don't like when he does that. So I'm not a fan of this album. It's my least favorite Paul album. The regular. I like Kisses on the Bottom better personally if we're ranking them. So yeah. Now I've got it all out of the way. Is why I went first there. But I love Run Devil Run. Love it.
Mhm.
One day we'll do a show on that.
Yeah.
Okay.
We'll love to do that.
So yeah, so Ken, let's know what when you got this album and everything and your feelings and so forth.
Well, this was one time when obviously anytime there's anything new from any of the Beatles, I'm excited about it. But, my heart wasn't giving it 100% because I kind of felt like, some of these recordings are really good. Some of these performances are really good. Some of them are just half-hearted, But I think that part of the appeal in something like this, you're going to find, and one thing I've learned a lot about Beatles fans is that for some of them, production is very important. Some people like when production is really polished, a lot of work is put behind it. Some people like raw, intense recordings. or garage band type sounds. Garage band is kind of how I feel about this album. This is like if Paul was in your basement and he was there with a 4-piece group, this is what he would sound like. Without any overdubbing, without slickening the sound, this would be a natural sound for Paul and his band. And some people love that because it's
with the door closed.
So, I mean, I like a lot of this. There are songs on here. I think it's a very inconsistent album, but when he really hits it, like, for example, I love Don't Get Around Much Anymore. I love that arrangement of that song. And that's not a rock song, but he gave it a rock arrangement. But I mean, something like that, I think 20 Flat Rock, considering the history of how important that song was, you know, when John and Paul met each other for the first time, supposedly the first time. I'm in Love Again. This, when he does Fats Domino, he is so much at home.
Yes.
Especially I'm Going to Be a Wheel Someday. That's a really fun recording there. And when he does Elvis Presley, he's right at home. And apart from loving the songs and knowing that he loved those songs, it helps you to understand, like we always heard, he had the Little Richard voice. He also had the Elvis Presley voice. He could do the Fats Domino voice. Lady Madonna is very Fats Domino-ish. And Fats recorded Lady Madonna. So when he's doing material from these artists, he's just so perfect at it. I mean, Just Because is an absolutely fantastic recording.
Yeah.
It's a fun recording. The band is rocking. This is exactly how I would want it to sound. But then there are certain recordings like, I don't know, Lucille. I think Paul's vocals could have been better on Lucille.
Yeah, surprisingly lackluster on that, I think. I mean, because he loves that song so much, and I prefer the live one that he did 79. I think he did.
Oh yeah, Campuchia and the 79 tour. That's a fantastic performance of Lucille. Yeah. That's All Right Mama. Again, he has a whole history with that song. And you know, being an Elvis Presley song. He's right at home with that. Summertime, fantastic vocals on that song, I think. Right. And the fact that he's doing something different, he's doing a musical song, George Gershwin. That stuff I like a lot, and I love Cracking Up. I didn't even know the original from Bo Diddley, and I like the fact that that has kind of a reggae, arrangement to it. Those songs are fantastic, but sometimes they're not so good. It's inconsistent, but when he's good, he's really good. Whereas I think Rock and Roll is a much more consistent album.
I think so. And there's a lot of good material on here as I'm reading. I just wish like Lordy Miss Claudie. I'd like to hear him. And Kansas City, at first I'm thinking he's going to do the Willard Harrison version, where it's a little, it don't go into that like hey like the Beatles did, but he goes into that right on this. He doesn't just sing it.
He does a little bit of that.
He does a little bit.
So anyway, just well, that's interesting thoughts there. So
that was Little Richard, that part, the hey. Little Richard,
But he puts it in, but he did it the same thing here as he did with the Beatles. I was kind of hoping he was just going to do the single, or I don't know why, but a little different from the Beatles feel.
Right.
Kid, how about you?
Well, I remember being really excited when this came out because, of course, I've been hearing about the album. I mean, it was, back when, I think by the late 80s, I had subscribed to Beatles Fan, and I heard about it that way. And so when the news came out, I did not subscribe to Club Sandwich, so I didn't know that you could get this album through that. So when it was announced, in 91, we're finally going to get it, I was like, oh, this is awesome. Finally, I can hear this whole thing, and I liked it at the time. I really, and I loved hearing 20 Flight Rock because of the whole history behind it. And so, I really liked it at the time. And then Run Devil Run came out years later and completely changed my opinion of this.
Was that Paul from Hamburg?
Wow. Yeah, right. Yeah, really. I mean, as you said, Tom, Run Devil Run kicks
Yeah.
this album's
Yep.
ass. I mean, no doubt. I mean,
That
no
should have been
doubt
the
about it.
show. That should have been the show.
Yeah,
That was
I mean, it's, Paul just sounded so energized on that album, and here I don't know. I mean, now listening to it, all these years later, and you can't help but compare it. Yeah, it's interesting. I guess part of it is, as you said, Tom, is the mix, it's the recording. I don't know. And it doesn't, the whole rawness part of it. I mean, it doesn't have to be polished.
No.
That doesn't bother me. It just, at times it just sounds, maybe, Paul sounds a little more, I don't know, restrained or something than he
I think
should.
so.
Yeah, I mean,
A little half-spirited, I think.
yeah, and you just think, come on, this is your, this is your milieu. I mean, this should be, right at home. But as you said, Ken, there are times where he does sound right at home, and when he's cooking, he's cooking. I mean, I do like his version of Kansas City, because he does sound like he's having fun. I mean, and this, as I said, 20 Flight Rock, I do like his version of it, even though it could be a little looser than he's doing it. It still sounds a little on the stiff side, but it's still good. I do like his version of Lucille here, and boy, the band that he had on this record, wow. I mean, even though they probably, they may not have been recorded to really show them off to their best ability, still, I mean, the pianist on this was just top notch. I mean, top notch. Chris Whitten, who of course, we knew really well from his touring band back in the day. I mean, he was just spot on. The guitar, I mean, just great stuff. I actually liked his version of "That's All Right, Mama." I thought it had just the right amount of reverb on his voice. I do think they got that right. Because I actually like the reverb on this better than the reverb on Rock and Roll's Bebop-A-Lula, because I thought that overdid it a little bit. And here I thought they got that right, just because I thought, okay, John, this is how it's done.
I'll give you that one.
The different just because.
Though. I know.
It's different just because.
Yeah, but I just thought, why didn't you do this, John? This is how you do it. Why didn't you pick this one? Because that sounds fantastic. So I thought those were the highlights. But don't get around much anymore. I didn't love the rock treatment. And I remember when I first heard this, that was one of the cuts I didn't particularly like, because I just thought I prefer the jazzy version of that. I just didn't know if I loved that as a rock song. And I do remember hearing that as the B-side, so that was one cut that, as you said, that was not completely new. But yeah, it's really interesting. This is a perfect example of how your opinions can change over the years about an album, because when this first came out, I was just like, oh, this is so good. And this is, just to hear Paul do these songs, he's just the best at covering these. And, but then, as I said, Run Devil Run came out, and I mean, he just sounded so different than this. Yeah. I mean, he just sounded re-energized, and I just reinvigorated. And this, it just really, to me, blew this out of the water. And so now there are few cuts I like still off of this, but yeah, it just sounds very different now.
Well, we're talking about just because, and back to the John version. I'm not saying this is the result on the finished album, but wasn't that one of the notorious drunk tracks that circulated when he was trying to sing "Just Because"? Anybody ever hear that material?
Yeah.
Yes. Yeah, it was.
I mean, he doesn't sound drunk. I'm just trying to I'm like scrambling for like a little excuse here that it doesn't sound.
There are functional drunks out there, Joe. So
this is for sure. And I won't name names, but I gotta say the real low point of this album for me, which I don't want to let go by. I'm going to try to do, however he does that. And ain't that a shame? Oh, man.
Yeah, I was disappointed.
It's a little annoying.
I hate that. I got to be, it's a strong word, but don't dig that part, folks. Oh. I'm not doing it as good as he does it.
I'm gonna edit that part. I'm gonna pull that out. When I go back and edit this, I'm gonna put that on a loop.
Oh, that's what it
Right.
sounds like. It's what it sounds like, and it's on a looper. All right, so Tom, let's make sure. I want to get you in here.
Well, yeah. Well, that's one of the things you brought up, that that point about ain't that a shame. But one of the things that I do like to do with covers is see the when they take liberties, and what they do differently, and do I agree with it? Or I mean, I applaud them for taking liberties and taking chances,
Sure.
but it doesn't always work. I mean, but that's subjective. I mean, it could work for me, but not work for Ken, or vice versa. So, I do like to listen to these records just for that, to see what they do differently. And I remember picking this up when it came out. I remember being kind of excited. I knew a lot of even though, like as I said, I'm not the biggest fan of the 50s music, but I was excited because I knew a lot of these songs. But then when I see Kansas City, I thought this was the not the same powerful Kansas City as we remember. Hearing what was it, Beatles for Sale?
Yeah.
So
or Beatles 6.
hearing that, or yeah. So I remember feeling kind of little kind of down about that one. But the 20 Flight Rock I thought was excellent. Big fan of Lottie Miss Cloudy, and I prefer his version of Bring It On Home to John's version.
Yes.
On rock and roll.
I agree.
Lucille, I thought he had a little bit more powerful raspy voice on this one. And plus, I will say though, I do like the more stripped down version. Although I'm not the biggest fan of the mix of this, I do like the fact that it's a little more stripped down. You don't have like 30 people in a room, like you said, Ken, with the wall of sound type thing. Not that saying that killed those songs, but what I'm saying is I just think that the stripped down version was maybe the way to go. Cracking Up, I find very enjoyable. The Midnight Special is just like, man, I don't want to hear anybody do that but CCR. I got so used to hearing Creedence do that song. It's just like, why? But I will say that I love when he does Elvis. I do like this version of That's All Right Mama. However, if you want to hear him do an even banger version of That's All Right Mama, pick up the Sun record, Good Rock.
Don't know if I
Tonight.
heard that one. When did
I
he
don't know if
do
I
that?
know that one.
Yeah,
this came out in 2001, and he had the bass player and the drummer, the original member of Elvis band, play.
It's hard to beat Elvis on that. I think it's hard to beat Elvis, but
true. But Paul, really, I think the singing on this version is 10 times better, or the production of the mix, or however you want to say it. I mean, I think on this version it's a lot better.
He was very respectful of Elvis's version there, because it's the exact same arrangement.
Yes.
Yeah, cool.
I'll check that out.
Yeah, and plus he's got the bass too. I think Linda bought him that stand-up bass for his birthday one year.
That was on Love and Song.
That was on In the World.
I think he used the bass with a Heartbreak Hotel.
I don't remember.
Oh yeah. And was that with Chaos and Creation? Chaos and Creation when he played
the special.
Yeah.
And then he also shows it in the In the World Tonight documentary film as well. But yeah, I mean, again, these are Ken, you said it, they sound like they're having fun. That's, I guess, one of the standout things about these two records for me, as you can tell, they love this music. Yeah, the CHOBA might not be as consistent as rock and roll, but I like the track listing a little bit better. But it's still, again, unfortunately, I don't go to these as much as maybe I should. But I'm not going to turn them away. So
I still think the whole idea of production is very important when you're comparing these two albums, really.
Yeah.
Because I can't tell you how many fans that I've spoken to who will tell me they prefer Paul when it's just a natural sound, when he's not overproduced, when he's not overly slick. Some people might think, as powerful as Run Devil Run is, it's so perfect and polished and everything, they might prefer something more like this.
Right. But but he did it the same way as he did this. I mean, it took place 2 days. I mean, partly
Right.
different members on both days. It's just unfortunately, I think Chris Thomas did just a little bit better of a job, mixing,
Yeah.
the record than say than the Russian album. So.
Hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. But I think what's fascinating about both albums is that it gives you an insight as to, of course, the songs that shape them, and the
Yes.
artists that shape them.
Mm.
And I think what fascinated me about both of them, and made me excited about hearing both of them is, I wanted to hear them play these songs that clearly meant the world to them, and meant so much to them. I know with John, Phil Spector picked some of the songs, I know that, but still, these were the artists that shaped them, and so I wanted to hear how they were going to cover them and how they were going to interpret them. So I was really interested and excited to hear them. And as we've talked about, some of them worked out well, and some of them, not so much.
But that's also why it's so important when you're studying the Beatles to try and realize all these other artists that they grew up with in the 50s, some well-known, some lesser known.
Right.
And the Beatles did such great versions of oldies when they were together. That was a big part of their lives. You can listen to all the BBC stuff, which is wonderful. Live at the Star Club, read about all the songs that they covered live, many of which we'll never hear them do. But I'm happy every time that Paul in particular reaches back and wants to do some 50s stuff.
Oh, exactly.
Because it's so much a part of his history. And it seems like you look at these two time periods, when he needs to recharge his batteries, go back and do 50s rock and roll.
Well,
now,
yeah.
I don't know how he felt about the sessions with Phil Ramone, as much as I love Back on My Feet and Once Upon a Long Ago. And he did a lot of material with Phil Ramone that still is unreleased to this day, which hopefully will come out in an archival box set. But I'm sure he wasn't happy about the sales of Press to Play. So to recharge his batteries, I think what better thing to do than get a bunch of musicians together and do this 50 stuff that I love so much. And likewise, Run Devil Run was around the time when after Linda died.
Just gotta say that. Yeah.
Exactly.
He needed something to, pump him up, get his creative juices flowing again.
Yeah.
Also, you should check out the I Want to Walk You Home that Paul does for the Fats Domino 2-disc set.
I want these things all collected. I want a big Paul box.
Yes.
My most desired thing, we used to call it cold cuts or some kind of real odds and sods kind of box with everything, even if it's repeated off of the archives. Put it all in there. That's what I want really bad.
He should have done an entire album of Fats Domino.
Yeah.
Because
very
even
good.
now, with all the talk about his aging voice, so much of Fats Domino stuff is in a low register that he can handle.
And he's very good at interpreting Fats Domino.
Next idea. That's a good idea.
Yep.
What do you say, Paul? Come on. I know you're watching. Come on.
Paul loves Fats. That's the name of the
Yep. And he's very good at interpreting Fats. Absolutely.
Yeah.
So I'm wondering, any more thoughts on anything you want to put together about both albums? I mean, I'll leave it to anybody if you can think of any other point you want to make. Or do we cover it?
Well, it's two very different approaches in making an album. It's the same in the sense that it's 50s and early 60s. And even in the case of Paul's album, doing Summertime, a much earlier song, and Don't Get Around much anymore. But still, I mean, if you want something that's looser production-wise, and it sounds like this is Paul with a band, as natural sounding as if he was in your own house with a band doing it, then probably the Russian album is more to your liking. If you want something that's much more produced, and I really like most of the arrangements on Rock and Roll, then that's more to your liking. So they're very different. You know, I
Yeah.
can't really say which one I like better because they
Well, that's
both
why I
have their
go
strengths.
by. Yeah, that's why I go by track list on these, because I tend to like, Paul's a little bit better because I just tend to like those particular songs a little bit better.
I
You
like
know?
John's much better
Yeah.
in this case.
Yeah.
In
No,
this case.
Probably
say.
I do, lean a little more toward Paul's, but as I said, over the years, I have grown to appreciate John's rock and roll album a bit more. And as you mentioned earlier, Joe, that 2000 was a 2004 remix,
Yeah,
was it
Four.
2004? That did a lot of good.
Yeah, we can't
because
stress that enough. Check.
no,
Track
yeah, go with
that down.
that version, because the original version, which is what I heard first time, I think that was a big part of the reason that I didn't initially like it, because it was so muddy sounding. The 2004 remix, way better, way better. So
I
go
agree.
with that one.
Yeah. All right. So that's our shoe, I suppose, folks. And I don't know. I'm looking for last minute comments. A lot of comments. We had a lot of people here.
Weighing in here.
I know Paulina really likes this album, the Paul's Russian album. And Andy, we should mention Andy Nichols, your partner on Two Legs, Tom.
He loves this record.
Rock and roll. This one too?
Yeah, he loves rock and roll. It's his favorite John Lennon
rock
record.
and roll is his favorite John Lennon album.
Wow.
And I almost thought, should we have Andy on here for this? I almost thought,
Yeah.
Yes.
We got to find out why.
Well, he did say why, if I can spill the beans. He says because that's John. That's John. Ron was rock and roll. That's John, who he is. Now, I beg to differ. Yes, that John was a rocker at heart, but I think John's original songs are John, really.
Yes.
He puts all his own angst and his pain and his love and everything and his philosophies in his songs. That's John, too. So I know what Andy's saying when he says John was rock and roll and all that. I know what he means. But
yeah.
I would like to say one thing. And certainly I respect your opinion, Kit, and how you feel about the 2004, the remix. I never had a problem with the original mix. So I like both. When it comes to most of the solo music, I think that they all became really good producers in their own way. And sometimes they had co-producers on their albums and all. But I never had a problem with the original mix of rock and roll.
Yeah.
But
I don't know. Yeah, it just always sounded very muddy.
Some of the tracks more than others to me. Like I think I much prefer "You Can't Catch Me" on the 2004, for example.
Yeah.
His voice was really hard to. I couldn't hear a lot of the words
that's
on
true.
that or make out the words. Still hard to make out the words. But these days, you just go on, you go, okay, lyrics.
Yeah.
On that song,
because there was no lyric sheet with it. Usually, John provides lyric sheets, but there was no lyric sheet with the rock and roll album.
Right.
For whatever reason.
Yeah. Our good friend Tom Liberani, who of course was on our show just about a month or so ago, said, I think the band Paul had on Run Devil Run was a bit more polished than the musicians used on the Russian album.
Oh, they had what's this? The great wow.
David Gilmour.
Dave Gilmour.
Dave Gilmour.
Yeah. Pretty good.
Ian Pace on drums, so.
Yeah. But
all right.
I think this is go
do
ahead.
you want more polish?
Yeah.
Again,
after hearing this one, I want a little more polish. Yeah.
And I think this episode has showed, the producer and mixing all, it matters. It really does.
Paul just really had, with Run Devil Run, I feel he just had a lot more fire in his belly, so to speak.
The energy.
It just sounds like that to me. I don't know.
Off the charts.
Yeah.
So. Well, that was fun. Okay, well,
really
now we're going to talk business, and I always like to leave it to Kit to that. Let us know where they can find us and all that kind of jazz.
Yes, I will do that. And also we have a couple of programming notes to share.
Yes.
So first of all, you can, of course, find us on this YouTube channel right here. And please subscribe if you haven't done so already. And please tell your friends. And as always, we thank you for all of your support. And, really, we couldn't do the show without you. And, we thank all of you for just your continued support and your comments and everything. So, so you can find us here. You can find us on our Facebook page. You can find us on Twitter at talkmoretalk1, the number 1. You can reach us via email at talkmoresolotalk@gmail.com, and you can find us on the web at talkmoretalk.com. Now, our next episode is going to be our panel from the fest. So that's going to be our next episode. So I'm not sure precisely when that's going to be up. That will, of course, be after the fest. So it'll be sometime after August 13th. So as soon as I can, I will edit that and get that up here. So of course, you will know when that will go up. After that, we are going to be taking a bit of a summer hiatus. We just need to, have a little summer break. So we will be back. So don't worry. But we're just taking the rest of the summer off. So we will of course let you know when the break will be over. So that's those are just a couple of programming notes. So and somebody asked, Mark asked in the comments, will there be a virtual option for attending the fest? I think there will be, but I don't know if everything is going to be available, virtually. I don't know if our panels will be broadcast live, but don't worry, because as I said, ours will be available as a program, and Andy Nichols is going to be recording everything, like all the panels are on together. I mean, everything. Ed is going to be, taping Toppermost of the Poppermost, and so don't worry, you're going to find this stuff on all of our channels. So if you can't see stuff on the virtual option, don't worry, you'll see it on all of our different channels or hear it. So that's
all right. And what about what everybody's up to? Some news. Go back to Kit. Kit, what's going on with you?
Okay, just a couple of brief things. I am going to be teaching, I think I mentioned this last time, but I'm going to be teaching a couple of classes. One starts in September. I'm going to be teaching a 4-part series on the British invasion. And so I think probably some people who are watching might be interested in that.
What was that?
Yeah. And again through Monmouth, and so
Revolutionary War, was that what that was?
Yeah. There you go. And so part 1 starts September 19th. It'll be September 19th and September 26th. It's part 1, which is beginnings and influences. So this is going to be just right before the British invasion hits. So I'll be talking about, groups that influence groups like the Beatles and so forth. And then part 2 will start December 7th and it will last December 7th, 14th. It'll be the first wave, 1963 through 1967. I'll post all the registration links. So really looking forward to doing that. And the latest Toppermost of the Poppermost episode is up, and it's actually from last month, but it's the B-side American charts. And just want to remind you guys, I said it at the beginning of the episode, the panel we're going to be doing is another, at the fest, is going to be another Wrack Our Brains. So please send in your questions for our esteemed panel, and you can submit your questions right in the comments right on this video. And you just need to send them in before August 11th. So,
okay. All right, Kit. Tom, what's going on?
Well, busy business as always. Is that 10 days ago we dropped an episode. We had a fan of the show. His name is Kyle Han. He made a great suggestion. We did a show called 21 and the 21st. Is what we did is we picked our 21 favorite songs of the 21st century. We made a double album out of that. So that was a lot of fun. And thank you for that suggestion. And if you have suggestions, you can email us at twolegspodcast@gmail.com, and we love to hear your suggestions. And we find it a good suggestion, we'll do it put it on a show. This past Saturday, we in the past we did a series about John and Paul. with friend Anthony Rotuno. Now we're moving on to George and Paul, and we had a friend Owen Ling, who I'm sure a lot of people just love some of his opinions, and but he was a hoot to have on, and he'll be joining us for part 2. This might be a 3-part series, but the first part focuses on the years 69 through 75, and obviously we talk about the stuff that happened prior to 69. So just don't think that it's just those years. But part 2 will probably be something like 76 to 85. Just depends on how much stuff we find to talk about. So that was a lot of fun. This coming Saturday, we're gonna do an episode on. We're gonna do a watch the In the World Tonight documentary video from 93?
97.
No, sorry, thank you, 97. That was to coincide with the release of Flaming Pie. So we watched that and we talked about it. We reviewed that as well. So that was fun. And then we're also got be on the lookout for an episode with Mark Easter and Chip Mattinger, and we're going to be talking about the year 1989. And don't call it a comeback, because he'd been here all along.
Comeback,
but
I mean,
but I mean, it's an interesting thing though, because to you guys, let's real quick. 89 Flaming Pie. I'm sorry, Flowers in the Dirt. Was that a comeback or a return to form? What do you guys consider that, Ken?
I don't consider it either, because Press to Play was a great album to me.
Mhm.
Yeah.
There
you go.
So
there you go.
it's
generally
only the way that you look at it.
Yeah.
Can I just say, when we had Ken Womack on a while ago, we were talking about the George Harrison album, that was his return to form. Like, what was wrong with 33 and a third?
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
So
it was
it's
11 years
thing.
ago.
Love that album.
So I think creatively speaking, I think that Press to Play was a magnificent album. It just wasn't received very well publicly. So was it a comeback, Flowers in the Dirt? In terms of critical success, yes. It still didn't sell that well.
Right.
It only went as high as 21 on the charts, and that's
And the tour. I mean, 89 in general, not just speaking about the album, but
yeah.
I mean, went to number 1 in the UK, but we're here in the States. But
I know we.
But I
tend
mean,
to
it's
think,
yeah.
But still, I get upset when I hear that was his comeback.
Right.
Know?
No,
so,
I
think
agree.
history shows
it. Yeah.
Mhm.
Or maybe
But,
it wasn't after that.
Thought.
I don't know.
Yeah.
Why are you saying
as
history
usual,
shows that? It
Well,
doesn't.
because it does. I mean, I don't want to get into a big argument now at the end of the show, but
Yeah. You
Some
open a
other
can
time
of
I'll
worms,
this is what the fans want. This is what the fans want. They want us to argue.
argue.
it's not about arguing, no, because that's what you have to. Things exist as a vibe for a reason. Whatever it is, like that such and such was a failure, or such and such was a success, and like Broad Street is generally considered a failure or a low point for Paul. Generally, now people love it, like Mr. Broad Street. Hey Ed, how you doing, Ed? Ed loves it. That's fantastic. But I think things get reputations for a reason, and I just think that generally people think, and this is a topic for another show. It's 2 hours in. That Paul, I believe, is the general feeling. I think in general that he lost his way somewhere after Broad Street, and was trying different things. And I like a lot of what he did. Spies Like Us, some of the songs off Press to Play, and Once Upon a Long Ago, yada yada yada. And then I think he really started getting bigger again and more respected more.
Okay, well, that's why we do shows like this, but there's lots of different opinions out there, which we've expressed here and I've expressed on my channel. And I certainly don't think that the second half of the 80s that Paul was lost, like it's been said. So, but that's why we talk about it here. So we have different opinions.
Well, sorry I opened that can of worms, but please check us out on YouTube, Two Legs, a Paul McCartney podcast, and please subscribe. And thank you for everybody that subscribes to this show. If you're an older person that has kids, have them listen to this show. Have them listen to the music as well. Introduce them to the music, because we would love to get younger people to listen to the music and to listen to us talk about the music. And Ken,
Mark
go
says,
ahead.
save
There
this
you
for
go.
later. We gotta rush these up. All right, Ken, what are you doing?
Okay, first of all,
a lot.
I just want to say that between this show and things we said today, that we've been blessed. We had the two Marks on. Mark Hudson on this show, Mark Rivera on things we said today. And by the way, thank you to everybody who wrote in to us about the Mark Hudson show, that it was one of the best we've had. I agree. He's a fantastic person to interview. He's got so many stories to tell. He's never at a loss for words, Mark Hudson. Anyway, so thank you to all of you who wrote to us about that. Mark Rivera did a 2-part interview with us on things we said today. You should know Mark as being the music director for Ringo Starr and his all-star band, and over 30 years with Billy Joel as a sideman for him. So we did a lot of talking about working with Ringo, the different lineups, some talk about Billy Joel, lots of talk about the Beatles, what the Beatles have meant to Mark. And it was wonderful. So if you can, check out the 2-part interview with Mark Rivera, things we said today. On my channel, Ken Michaels Radio, we just did another Ultimate Beatles Trivia Show, number 7. And Andy Nichols returned as the reigning champ. He had previously won the last 2 shows. We'll see if he wins in the 3rd, makes it 3 in a row. He's joined by John Montagna, who's been a guest on this channel and things we said today. John is a bass player. He played in the Alan Parsons Project for 7 years. If you love the Happy Together tours, he's been a member of the house band. He's been at the Fest for Beatle Fans doing bass clinics. He was one of the people who challenged Andy, one of the contestants, and Susan Ryan was also one of the contestants. And she has been a fixture at the Fest for Beatle Fans. She's been on a lot of panels, and she also is one of the co-authors of this recent book, Fab Four Cities. Liverpool, Hamburg, London, and New York, all the major venues in those 4 cities. And so Susan and John both challenged Andy, and there's lots of Beatle games and trivia questions in that show, just like what I do on my website and on my radio show, Every Little Thing. If you can, check out Ken Michaels Radio. That's the YouTube channel. My website is kenmichaelsradio.com. Like I just mentioned, Beatles trivia. I have a new one up for the game Scrambled Eggs. That's a game I just dreamed up, by the way. And
see what you did there.
By the way, do I have it here? I don't think I have it here. But since Mark Rivera was just on things we said today, I had 1 copy left of his CD that he put out in 2014 called Common Bond. And Ringo was on 1 track drumming called Money, Money, Money. You can win a copy of that CD. It's one of 10 prizes you can win between books, CDs, and DVDs on my website, kenmichaelsradio.com. My radio show is Every Little Thing. If you want to hear it, the easiest way to do so is to go to the website for WFDU. That's Fairleigh Dickinson University's website. It's WFDU.FM, and they post my show, Every Little Thing. They make it available for 2 weeks after they run it on the radio station. So you go to their page where they have archival shows, type in Every Little Thing, and there's 2 shows there that you can listen to. So you'll get a taste of the radio show I've been doing for 41 years now. Beatles, solo, thematic sets, interviews, rarities, hits, a mixture of all that, all packed into 1 hour. So that's where I'm at.
Well, I tell you, this has been some show. It's exhausting and fun, but I want to say thank you to everybody for watching, and thank all of my co-hosts here. So I'm going to say, on behalf of Kid O'Toole, Tom Agnotti, and Ken Michaels, this is Joe Mayo saying, we've gotten to the top. I'm too tired to rock.